Then I was sent to Mandla and I joined the Rani Durgavati College there to teach English. There we were not getting accommodation, and there were two more professors with me who were desperately seeking for accommodation in the town. Now I had already, as I told you, I was been testing and trying Meher Baba. And in Mandla, I told those two colleagues of mine that don't worry, I tell you we are going to get a house right now, and I know one person who is able to do everything for me and for us, is Meher Baba. Well, they looked a little surprised and incredulous. And I then told them that, well, let us see whether it happens or not. Inwardly, I prayed to Meher Baba, Baba, the first man we are going to meet on the street should be able to provide us with accommodation. And to my great wonder again, when we had gone a few yards ahead on the road, suddenly a man came. And we just went up to him and said, Mr. Such and such, I don't know your name. Will you introduce? He said, yes, this is my name. He said, Mr. X, could you tell us whether we could get lodging somewhere, some house to let or rent? He said, yes. Only a week back, Mr. Lakhera's house has fallen vacant and you can go there. And he went away. Now my friends looked at me. The two professors says, how did you really know that there was a house and you are trying to play up tricks and all that? I said, no, I was as starkly ignorant of it as you are. I had just prayed to someone and it appears that he has fulfilled that prayer. He said, we don't believe it all. Again said inwardly, Baba, give me some sort of feeling so that I could make them convinced. And suddenly the thought came to me, the house where we are going is a double-storied one, and we are going to get a room which will be on the first floor, on the upper floor, and on the staircase there will be a door and you will find it locked. It all flashed into me, sort of intuition or whatever it is, but Baba helped me to feel like that, and I told the two professors that we are going to a house which will double-storied, and there will be a staircase, and there will be a lock on the door of the staircase, and we will be getting a room on the upper story. Well, they didn't believe, but when we went there, seeing was believing. It was exactly like that. And they also looked at me in sort of surprise, and I was surprised more than I could express in words. I didn't know what really was happening to me. Is this Meher Baba really omniscient and omnipotent as his devotees tell us? Well, there were many such stories. I don't know how long should I carry on. I see. Well, I met Baba. Baba gave me certain instructions, and I returned home after receiving an abundant measure of love from him, abundant measure of compassion. He said, do my work. I returned home and gave up my job. Well, it was a guested officer's post, fetching a very good salary and everything. Officer's post, fetching a very good salary and everything, and everybody at home was unhappy because I had given up such a nice job. But I felt like doing nothing except sing his name, think of him, meditate on Baba, and just give up every worldly tie. And so I left home too. And I went to a place called Bhedaghat, some 13 miles away from Jabalpur, on the banks of the river Narmada, a very picturesque spot, where I stayed for 2 months. During those 2 months, I was trying to practice what you call silence of mind. I was trying to make my mind silent, thoughtless. And I can tell you, any day it is one of the most difficult things, perhaps impossible, unless the grace of Master comes. Well, suddenly we received a telegram from Meher Baba, and also a telegraphic money order. Meher Baba had sent a message to me, come at once to Mahabaleshwar, and money is being sent for you. Well, I took the money and bought a ticket, went to Mahabaleshwar. When I reached Baba, Baba didn't look very happy with me. He said, why did you give up that job? Do you think that giving up a job will bring you God realization? I said, well, I don't know, but I was feeling absolutely no charm in doing any service. And I was intensely trying to make my mind silent. Baba looked a little intrigued. He asked me, what sort of practice is that? There were many other devotees. He turned towards them and said, what is Hazra saying? What is Amiya saying? How is he going to stop his mind? They said, we also don't understand what he's meaning, sir, Baba. So Baba looked at me and said, what is the procedure you are adopting? I told Baba that I'm trying to think I'm not mind. I'm trying to think I'm beyond mind. I'm trying to think I'm above mind. And maybe that is the way to silence my mind. He looked at me with a big smile and said, well, Amiya, don't you realize that it is your mind which is saying it is below mind and above mind and beyond mind, and it's mind saying that, well, now mind is going to stop. He said it's as difficult as riding your own shoulders, or the best thing therefore would be for you to stop practicing how to stop the mind. Now, if you follow these 4 instructions, take them as A, B, C, D. If you follow these 4 instructions, one day you will become MA, Master of Arts. Well, I didn't know. I just told him it might get very difficult for me to obey your orders. He said, you have to be prepared to obey my orders to the last letter, even staking your life and all your mental inhibitions and conditions. I said, Baba, I don't know, I may try. So Baba just told me, you go from this place to a crossing, you will come across. Well, I didn't know. I just told him, it might get very difficult for me to obey your orders. He said, you have to be prepared to obey my orders to the last letter, even staking your life and all your mental inhibitions and conditions. I said, Baba, I don't know, I may try. So Baba just told me, you go from this place to a crossing, you will come across a leper woman there, Mahabaleshwar crossing, where you will find a leper woman. You commit intercourse with her and return to me. When I heard this, I shook. I almost trembled and felt so nervous. I said, Baba, it's not possible for me to do it. He turned towards me and said, well, obeying me is that difficult. Anyway, don't worry. I've given you 4 instructions. If you try to fulfill those 4 instructions, I again assure you, one day you will become MA, Master of Arts. Well, I returned home. One of the instructions for me was to return home. The second was to go for a job. Third was to please your mother, please my mother. And he also said, do not marry until I tell you to. Well, when he said, please your mother, I couldn't understand why he didn't include my father. My father was alive at that time. It was only 3 months later on, when he dropped his body, that I came to understand that Baba actually meant this, perhaps, that I was only to live with my mother and must do something to please her. It was only about a year after having given up that attempt to stop my mind, that sitting in the Guru Prasad hall, attending one of the Baba meetings, Baba sitting in front of me, listening to one flute player, wonderful music it was, that Baba suddenly turned his gaze towards me. And believe me, my mind really did stop. As long as Baba looked at me and into my eyes, I was incapable of thinking. It was pure awareness with no thoughts. It's a wonderful vacuum. And at that time, I even didn't know that I was not thinking. It was only after Baba had moved his face away that thoughts gushed back into my mind. And suddenly I remembered that this was what I was aspiring to attain last year in Bhedaghat and couldn't succeed. It actually means that if Baba wants it, with a look he can give it. But then, of course, it was just a minute's experience, just to perhaps prove that yes, these things can easily be given by Baba if he feels gracefully disposed. Another desire in me was to see things afar off, which you call clairvoyance. And I must tell you, because since you want that, I must tell you many of my experiences. It was on 10th July 1958. When Baba had given his universal message, the darshan was going on outside the hall. I was in the queue. And something happened. It was a dazzling splendor, and I closed my eyes and I saw Baba clearly, and I saw everything clearly with closed eyes. To any distance, I saw all the people with my eyelids on my eyeball, and it in no way came in between myself and my sight, and I was unable to understand what was that. But one thing, of course, now again, if I close my eyes, I can't see. But one thing has happened for sure. From that day, 10th July 1958, whenever I close my eyes, whenever I concentrate my look on anything, anywhere, Meher Baba's face appears before me, and it appears before me constantly. His two big, black, powerful eyes gaze into my eyes. And I must tell you that sometimes I really do not get sleep because I see him. And when I see him, it's difficult to sleep perhaps. And I try to forget. Sometimes I try to forget that he is there constantly looking to me, looking at me. He's face to face with me all the time. It happened on 10th July 1958. Perhaps I didn't tell anyone. But since this is the day of sort of confession of everything, I'm telling you this has happened to me. As regards Baba, the compassionate father, you will be surprised to know how human he was in everything he did and said, how humanly interested he was in everything that I was doing at my own end here in Jabalpur, how keenly interested he was in my health, in the health of my family members, in my service and my service conditions. I'll narrate only one experience. My son was born with a cleft palate, and the doctors told us that unless that cleft palate is repaired by surgery, it will go very difficult for the child to swallow anything. Later on, he will be exposed to all sorts of respiratory affectations and infections. My wife and myself went with my child to Calcutta to get him admitted in the West Bengal Polyclinic. But to our great dismay, we found that the polyclinic was literally flooded by patients. No accommodation to be got, they told us, for another 6 months, maybe more. Now, we had entailed a lot of expenses by going all the way to Calcutta, and I didn't understand whether I would be able to manage all that period of staying in Calcutta itself. I returned. Would be able to manage all that period of staying in Calcutta itself. I returned to Jabalpur, leaving my wife there, telling her to just go on trying to get admission in the hospital for the child, and if she failed after a month or so, she should also return. Now she was trying, and there was no sense in trying because there were literally so many patients, and already there was a very long waiting list for the patients. I then wanted my wife to return, and I was rather sorry that the child couldn't be operated upon for that cleft palate of his, and also much money gone in the bargain. Suddenly I received a letter from Meher Baba, in which Bhau writes for Meher Baba, Amiya, Baba inquired about you and your family. And I told Baba that Amiya has become very obedient nowadays, and therefore he is not writing any letters as there is a ban on correspondence from your side. Baba said, well, I give him permission to write me one letter, and just let me know how he is and how his family is. I got an opportunity. I wrote to Baba a letter telling that I have been to Calcutta for my son's operation. I've returned and my wife is still there and there are no hopes of an accommodation in the hospital. The seats are all full and well, I am worried about it all, Baba. And suddenly another message came to me from Baba in which Baba wanted me to inform my wife at Calcutta to try again, once again. The message was, ask Gauri to try once again in the West Bengal Polyclinic, and in case she fails, she should return with the child to Jabalpur. Well, a wonderful thing happened. Meanwhile, the polyclinic was closed down, sine die, because there was a strike. It was a quarrel between the doctors, the surgeons and the anestheticians, and so the quarrel resulted in a total lockout. Now, even if there was a shade of possibility of getting the child admitted in the hospital, that too was gone. And my wife was about to return to Jabalpur when she received my letter that Baba wants you to try just once again. My wife went to the West Bengal Polyclinic, hoping against hope, because it was already locked out. When she went there was just one person at the inquiry counter, and the hospital was of course open, but there was nobody else there. She, in a very, I should say, faint voice asked, can my child get admission in this West Bengal Polyclinic? He said, yes, of course he can. He said, but I heard that there is a lockout. He said, this very morning the strike has been called off. And the entire staff has returned. And there is not a single patient in the hospital. So, you can not only get accommodation for a half cabin, but you can get accommodation for a cabin or for 50 cabins or for 100 cabins. You only get accommodation for a half cabin, but you can get accommodation for a cabin or for 50 cabins or for 100 cabins. The whole hospital is at your disposal now. What a wonderful thing it was, you know. I still can't believe that Baba perhaps had to manage it that way to bring about a quarrel, to get the hospital closed, to drive away all the patients, reopen the hospital, and make it possible for my child to go for his operation, which was again by Baba's blessings a successful one. And my child is named Meher Kumar, that is the son of Meher Baba. We are all his children. He is our compassionate father. I am quite sure in distant future, everyone perhaps, the scientist, the intellectual, the atheist, the artist, everyone will realize this one thing, that there is God, God exists, and that God had very recently been on earth visiting us in physical form to tell us about Him and to tell us to love Him, so that we ultimately will be able to find out, discover for ourselves that we are none else but He Himself in different forms. Jai Baba.
You say that you had gone from atheism to becoming a staunch believer in God, but was this something of a shock to you to go from one extreme like that to the other?
No, it wasn't exactly a shock. I think my atheism was not a sort of fanatical atheism. What I mean to say that I was not trying to cling to atheism for its own sake. My thirst for knowledge was there. If I didn't believe a thing, it was because there wasn't sufficient evidence for it for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to believe a thing just for the sake of not believing it. But as there was no proof or evidence of divine things or divinity, or what you call God as omniscient, omnipotent and omnipresent one, naturally, for me as a person, I didn't want to take in anything or everything that was said by others who believed. So, when personal experiences came in the wake of meeting Meher Baba, I gradually switched over to believing, as I told you earlier, that even after meeting Meher Baba, it took several years for me, several years of testing Baba also. I didn't despair myself, I also didn't despair Baba, to be absolutely sure. And I tell you that it was a very pleasurable experience of coming to get evidence after evidence of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence. And that wasn't all, and of love, which really counts, is so vital in our life. So it wasn't shock at all that way. I will sum it up. I'll rather sum it up by saying that earlier I had absolute faith in reason. Earlier I had absolute faith in reason, and later on I had found absolute reason in faith. Jai Baba.
You know, being that you were able to establish such a faith in Baba after the many things he did to grant your wishes for so long, but then after your faith was established, did Baba continue to grant your wishes or your thoughts as he had done previously?
Well, it's a very beautiful question, I should say. In the beginning, Baba was almost catering to everything that I was asking for. It wasn't, of course, one thing must be very clear about it. I was not asking for a thing for its own sake. For example, I didn't ask for an aeroplane. I was just asking for small things, very inconsequential so far as money is concerned. Things that could not go into what you call the more dazzling items of temptation. Just because my real motive was to test his power to provide me with those things at a distance of 700 miles, without any communication except prayers, inward prayers, not for those things themselves. Baba, of course, if he was condescending to get me all those things here at my end, it was also because he too must have appreciated that I was just trying to know whether such powers do exist or not. Well, after a span about 4 years, it must have been a fairly long period of testing and trying Baba out, my faith got absolutely established in Baba, in everything that is called divine, in the existence of a God, unlimited, infinite, absolutely established. And at the same time, as a matter of habit, this doubting which I was clinging to right since my childhood, this was something worth contending against. And literally I had to pray at Baba's feet to take away my doubting nature itself. I made a prayer like this. Inwardly I told Baba that, Baba, whatever comes to me now, the worst or the best, I must never gain doubt after having such a long period of testing you and finding you right 100% correct. Now, soon after that, what was happening was Baba was constantly telling me that, my son, you're now growing up. You're growing up, you're getting wiser and wiser, and there are responsibilities. You are supposed to work for me. You're supposed to go about, sing my name. I do a bit of singing too. And also go on doing lecturing, telling people, because that's a part of my work, to let people know I have come so that they might come to me and get the best of my physical presence here on earth. I have chosen you, it's your fortune to be one of my workers. So we were going for his work. Now, working for Baba was always a great pleasure. And ordinarily we are comfort-minded people, but I remember that we have been walking through fields and villages on end for weeks and not getting much sleep, even hardly a bite daily, And still we were very happy. Baba was sustaining us all through those days of stress and strain. So far as the other works were concerned, for example, I was interested in doing my research work in English literature. I was trying to do some work for my PhD. When I wrote a letter to Baba, Baba, please see that I get my PhD. I'm trying hard to get it. Now, a letter comes to me in reply. Baba says, don't get attached to research work. I also had written that letter that Baba, maybe I will be too busy with my research work and I won't be in a position to do Baba work so much. So he wrote me, do not do Baba work. You make others do Baba work and do your work, which is research work, but don't be attached to it. And what happened, I will tell you now. Just when I had done 1 year's research work, my guide left Jabalpur, went to Calcutta, and there was no trace, no communications with him. He never replied to my letters. So that work was all lost. Then another guide came to Jabalpur. Again, I took up a fresh topic because he insisted on a fresh topic, and I worked for a year, and he too went away. And this time he not only went away from Jabalpur, but went away from India. Again, the communication stopped. And twice I tried and couldn't get my PhD. Suddenly I remembered that Baba told me not to be attached to research work. Of course, I must tell you, honestly, that I was very bitter about it. But my guides had told me that you're going to get a PhD and it is going to be a wonderful work, really. And now suddenly the guides themselves going out of ken, and I'm helpless, and just all that I was doing set to naught. Well, it was a very frustrating affair indeed. But then I remembered Baba saying that you do not get attached to research work. And suddenly what happened, other persons who were doing research came to me, asked my help in correcting their thesis to somehow get myself acquainted, or rather, and in order to understand, 3 persons got their PhD. They mentioned my names in the thesis. Work, really. And now suddenly the guides themselves going out of ken, and I'm helpless, and just all that I was doing set to naught. Well, it was a very frustrating affair indeed. But then I remembered Baba saying that you do not get attached to research work. And suddenly what happened, other persons who were doing research came to me, asked my help in correcting their thesis. One was a thesis on economics, other was a medical thesis, a work on a comparative study on adenocorticoid acid secretions. Well, I had to study some medical subjects like those, and I had to somehow get myself acquainted, or rather versed in that particular topic, in order to be able to look into his thesis and make certain grammatical or literary corrections. And lastly, I got an engineering college thesis on heat transfer in internal combustion engines. Once again, I had to read some engineering topics, allied subjects, and in order to understand the topic itself, because we could not do any corrections, insert any changes or modifications in the thesis unless I personally knew something about that subject. And all these 3 persons got their PhDs. They mentioned my names in their thesis, and I don't know. Somehow I put up a smile and said, well, Baba actually has taken away my fascination for PhD work, my attachment to that work, and at the same time given me some sort of honor that others will come to you and get their thesis checked, the language corrected, and that's no small satisfaction perhaps. What I wanted to tell you, Brother Luck, is this, that later on, after my faith was established in Baba, Baba did not always fulfill what I wanted. But he knew better than me perhaps what I needed, and I am sure I can tell you to this date, I have never fallen short of getting those things that are really needed by me, by Baba's grace. And so far as wanting is concerned, perhaps it's a fact not only acknowledged by economics, but must be acknowledged by spirituality also, that God created man to want him. But man has been wanting so many things that even God, if he were to try to fulfill his words, wouldn't be able to do it. Jai Baba. I am asked to narrate some of my experiences when I was in Baba's presence. Well, I remember one very keenly. That was a darshan day in the month of May. Baba was giving his darshan in Pune, Guru Prasad, Bangalore, Pune. And I saw Baba profusely perspiring due to the heat. Somehow, perhaps, there was no handkerchief at hand, and Eraj had to go in to bring one to wipe Baba's forehead. During that interval, I suddenly felt a great urge to pass on my handkerchief to Baba. But something prevented me, perhaps shyness. Meanwhile, Eraj had come out with a handkerchief and he wiped Baba's perspiration. I returned to Jabalpur and I felt that I should make a gift of handkerchiefs to Baba next time I went there. Well, I remembered this, and next time I visited Baba, I had a pack of handkerchiefs with me. They were in my pocket, and when I went inside Guru Prasad Hall, I only hoped that Baba would be perspiring to give me a chance to present those handkerchiefs. And to my great dismay, he wasn't perspiring at all. It was not at all hot that day. So I didn't feel like taking out the handkerchiefs because I didn't have any apology to do it. Meanwhile, Baba called for a bowl of water to wash his hands. He had been distributing fruits and prasad to devotees. The bowl of water came, Baba dipped his hands in the water, and then, of course, when the hands were wet, Baba just looked at Eraj, gestured like this, and Eraj understood it was Baba was asking for a handkerchief or a napkin perhaps, and Eraj went inside. Baba looked at me, smiled, and I was almost tempted to take out that pack of handkerchiefs for Baba. Again something happened. I couldn't do it, and certainly I felt that it was a hopeless case. I will never be able to produce those handkerchiefs for Baba. And I found to my great, disappointment that Eraj has returned to Baba with a handkerchief, and Baba took the handkerchief, and I was sure he was going to dry his hands with the handkerchief. Now, Baba, being omniscient, knew that I had brought a pack and wanted to give that pack to him so much. And I wasn't somehow able to produce it out of shyness. So now he didn't wipe his hands with that handkerchief offered to him by Eraj, but rather took it in his hands and did like this towards me. Eraj interpreted as, Amiya, Baba wants you to take that handkerchief from Baba and give it back to him. I took the handkerchief which Baba gave to me and I gave it back to Baba. Baba smiled and wiped his hands with it and then returned it to Eraj. In a flash, I realized in a flash that Baba is God. And I had taken him just as a human being when I was thinking of giving him a pack of handkerchiefs. And just now he has proved that he being God, he knew that I wanted to give him handkerchiefs, and he at the same time also wanted me to know that he is the real giver. Unless he gives something to us, we cannot give it back to him. That was one of the very interesting incidents, and soon after that I had no hesitation in pulling out that packet of handkerchiefs from my pocket and surrendering it at Baba's feet with the feeling that, Baba, this packet of handkerchiefs, which actually are yours, are returned to you, just as that handkerchief was returned to you, which you had given me, in order to make me able to give it back to you. We only give what we receive from our divine, compassionate Lord. Thanks. Well, perhaps I have been telling you about Baba's compassion once too often. His compassion is infinite and everlasting. He is not in any way suffering from paucity of mercy. At the same time, I felt that his compassion at times can assume the form of severity too. It is compassion which is corrective, which is chastening, which is subduing. In this connection, I'd like to tell you one story. Baba had given me a few orders, asking me not to break them. One of the instructions that he had given me was, do not strike anyone in hatred or anger, however exasperated you might feel. Well, it so happened in 1963 probably, I think it was 1963 years old, that I had broken that instruction. I hit someone at Jabalpur. That was in daytime. By evening, I was feeling very much perturbed, and repentance was gnawing at my heart. I just knew that Baba, being omniscient, was definitely knowing that Amiya, his dear Amiya, has broken his instruction at Jabalpur. So what to do? In the evening, I at once took some money, purchased a ticket for Pune, and got into the train. My sole motive was to go to Guru Prasad and ask for Baba's forgiveness for having broken Baba's instruction. I went to Guru Prasad, but at the gate I was stopped by Badul. Badul looked at me. Badul is one of Baba's, was one of Baba's Mandali, members of Baba's Mandali. Looked at me, a bit annoyed, and said, well, Amiya, why have you come here? Baba is in seclusion and it doesn't see anyone. I think you are an educated person. You must know that. You must be able to read circulars and keep the spirit, and otherwise there's no weight in the words. Baba, why did you come at all? I said, I want to meet Baba because I have broken one of his instructions and I want his forgiveness. So Badul looked at me with the same annoyance and said, you had broken Baba's instruction at Jabalpur. Now you have come to Pune to break another instruction of Baba, to break through his seclusion and ask for his forgiveness. What kind of repentance is that? I'm not going to allow in. Please be outside the gate. I said, well, is there no hope of my getting into Baba's presence and asking his forgiveness? I must be forgiven. I must know for sure that Baba has forgiven me. Badul closed the gates right on my face and said, no, you can go back to Jabalpur and there's nothing for you to be done by us. I suddenly looked at me and shouted, why did you break his instruction? You have hit someone, isn't it? Well, I couldn't understand how Badul knew it. Nobody was supposed to know it. It happened in Jabalpur and there was no message anywhere. Said, why did you hit? I tell you that at the same moment, with the hand with which I hit, suddenly almost I felt that it was going paralytic. I felt all the numbness of a paralytic stroke. I lost the awareness of my right hand and shouted, screamed, and said to Badul, Badul, I don't know, something is happening to me. Perhaps I'm getting a paralytic stroke. And he looked at me with the same severity and said, well, I'm not concerned with whatever is happening to you. If anything is happening to you, there is a hospital in Pune. You can go and get yourself admitted in that hospital. Don't come in here. You've broken Baba's instructions. And he went in. He left the long approach to Baba's hall, and I was left alone outside the gate, and I started sobbing very violently. Well, I still remember I was out on the broad road, weeping and weeping my heart out to meet Baba. Only that gate was there between myself and my beloved father. And I don't know, Suddenly, when I was weeping, almost forsaken, I felt I was forsaken. Baba has really left me, and there was nothing for me now to do except commit suicide. I should go and jump into a pit and kill myself because Baba no longer loves me. He no longer owns me up. I was weeping, and in that mood, suddenly somebody from right within me said, "No, even Baba calls Baba. Even Baba also tries to do it. He cannot give you up. You are inseparably himself, within himself, and his realms are infinite." And I tell you that I had seen him in golden hue. I don't know. Suddenly, when I was weeping, almost forsaken, I felt I was forsaken. Baba has really left me, and there was nothing for me now to do except commit suicide. I should go and jump into a pit and kill myself because Baba no longer loves me. He no longer owns me up. I was weeping, and in that mood, suddenly somebody from right within me said, "No, even Baba calls Baba. Even Baba also tries to do it. He cannot give you up. You are inseparably himself, within himself, and his realms are infinite, and he cannot drive you out of his own infinity. Naturally, don't lose heart. You will never be separated from Baba." And when that feeling came in my heart, suddenly I found another disciple running up to the gate and opened the gate and said, "Amiya, Baba wants you to meet him." I ran in to Guru Prasad Hall. Baba was there. I tell you that I had seen him in golden hue, crimson hue, and at that moment I felt he was like a blazing shield of silver. He wasn't happy with me. He looked at me and said, "Why did you strike? I told you not to. Why did you forget that instruction? And why have you come here when I am in seclusion? You have broken another instruction." I said, "Baba, please forgive me." He looked at me and said, "All right, I forgive you, but I am not going to forgive you again if you commit that same mistake. Remember this, and now come, have my embrace and my love, feel happy." And when I was going out of the hall, he said, "No, come on, I'll tell you another thing to do. Amiya, come in the afternoon, there is a music function. I know that you love music, so you will enjoy the songs of Hirabai Bharotkar, a very great musician of India." I felt so happy and so jubilant. Baba had owned me up, and I returned to this guest house absolutely assured that Baba loves me so much, he has forgiven me. Suddenly I remembered that Baba has said that next time you do the mistake, I'm not going to forgive you. Now where is the guarantee? We are all human beings. We are all limited. Our capacities are, I think, niggardly total. And naturally, all my fear returned to me. I wasn't happy at all. So instead of reaching Guru Prasad at 4, I reached Guru Prasad a little earlier. And Baba just beckoned me to sit inside the room and just asked me, "Now, are you happy or not? I have forgiven you. You should look cheerful." I said, "Baba, I am not cheerful." "Why? I've forgiven you." I said, "But you also added that in case I again make a mistake in future, you will not forgive me any longer." So he looked at me and said, "Any longer?" So he looked at me and said, rather intrigued, he asked the question, "What do you want then? I can't understand." I told Baba, "Baba, this is a frank confession. I know, or rather very fortunately have come to know my limitations as a human being. And I do not want your love to be conditioned by my mistakes, your forgiveness to be related to my follies. If you forgive me, it should be eternal. If you love me, it should be infinite. And so this is what is keeping me worried. You have made me more worried than before." So Baba looked at me, looked at the Mandali which was sitting there and said, "Now what does Amiya want? I cannot understand what Amiya wants." So they looked at me and said, why don't you tell Baba what you want? I said, I want Baba to tell me that he has owned me up as his own forever and forever, irrespective of whatever I do, whether it is according to his liking or not. Baba again looked at me, looked at all the Mandali, said, just wonder what Amiya is asking for. And there was a moment of silence, painful silence for me. And he looked at me, and suddenly his fingers moved, and Eras read it and said, see Amiya, what Baba tells you is that from now, forever, you are permanently forgiven. In Hindi it was, tu kayam ke liye maaf hai. Now for Baba's sake, Amiya, tell us whether you are happy or not. I said, well, I'm very happy. Baba looked at me and said, he's very intelligent, but there is some screw loose in him. I said, Baba, well, I'm quite sure you can tighten up that screw. He said, no, I can't. I simply can't, because I know that keeping your company, Amiya, I've also got so many of my screws loose. Then he asked me to go to him and folded me in his embrace. I kissed him, he kissed me. I felt like simply running away with him. And all that cloud was gone. I felt once again that Baba is really God. In every sense of that word, is really love, most abiding. Our most near and dear friends fall out from us. Our dearest relatives cannot forgive us. But Baba remains the same permanently compassionate, all forgiving, all knowing, all loving Father. Jai Baba.